This is episode number 170. If you're thinking about selling your business, cashing out, and walking away, there's a big problem that may just keep you from doing that. That's what I'm talking about on this episode. That's coming up.
This is the Red Podcast. How to take your idea and make a name for yourself within your industry and beyond. Spread your message. Attract a following. Rise above the noise. Here's your host, David Hooper.
I got an email today from Jessica Rhodes. She's got a company called Interview Connections. I'm going to get to that in a second. First of all, I want to say this. If you've got an interview-based podcast or if you've got a message that you're looking to spread, Jessica is a great contact to make. InterviewConnections.com is her website. She'll find great guests for you. She'll book them. She'll confirm with them. It makes the interview process so much easier. And if you're a great guest yourself, she's also a great person to get to know because she can actually book you on podcast. So check her out, interviewconnections.com. The email that she sent me asked about selling businesses. She wanted to know, had I ever sold a business, if I would be a good resource to answer some questions about that. The long and the short of it is yes, I've attempted to sell businesses, but no, have not gone through with the deals. And here's why, because I'm a key man. I'm the personality, the driver behind the business. If you're running a personality-based business, and I'm going to assume that you are, because Red Podcast, the podcast for influencers, that is what we talk about here on this show. You need to know what I'm about to talk about. Should you be your brand? That's the subject of this episode. This is the Red Podcast. If you're a blogger, podcaster, speaker, marketer, you've got a nonfiction book, you're an entrepreneur with a message to spread, this is the podcast for you. The focus is how to take your idea, make a name for yourself, and make money. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Dallas, Texas for Podcast Movement. A couple of episodes ago, I reviewed that, redpodcast.com/168, if you're interested in my review of Podcast Movement. And while I was down there, I was there for 5 days, I saw a lot of personality. This is very common on podcasts. Podcasts are almost always personality-driven. And like podcasts themselves, some people would say that Podcast Movement and what went on there was all personality. I wouldn't disagree with that. I've talked about this here before. It's one of my big ideas. It's worth repeating that all people in a certain business pretty much do the same thing. I'll give you an example. Let's say music. Taylor Swift, she does basically the same thing as a wedding singer. She gets on stage, she performs songs. There is not a big difference between the mechanics of what a wedding singer does and the mechanics of what Taylor Swift does. Both of them walk on stage, they have a microphone, sing into the microphone. Same thing for politics. And we're right in the middle of a huge political cycle right now with the presidential election coming in 1 year. All presidents pretty much do the same thing. The ideologies of different people in different parties, they're a little bit different, but most people are voting on personality. And if you saw the recent GOP debate with Donald Trump, a man with no political experience, you can see that. 100% personality. When Bush got elected, what did people say about him? The comments I heard, he's so presidential. He's a guy I could sit down and have a beer with. 100% personality-based. And that's a double-edged sword. The guys he was running against, Kerry, for example, a little bit dull, didn't feel like you could really hang out with him. That's the reason that he lost. The main reason, not the ideology, but his personality. That is the positive of a solid personal brand. If you're personable, you've got a good personality, that's going to take you a long way. You don't have to be the best technician. Let's take it back to Taylor Swift. She can't sing. She can't dance. She's good looking, but not great looking. She's not perfect. It's her personality. You feel like you could hang out with her. You feel like you know her. You feel like you could be her. That's why tween girls, teenagers, that's why they love her. Let's talk about how it works with your business, and let's talk about some of the downsides. I'm going to take it back to Podcast Movement. What do you do in your personality-based business when you're ready to move on? As I mentioned earlier, it is difficult to sell a personality-based business because you, as the seller, are no longer involved. John Lee Dumas, saw him at Podcast Movement a couple weeks ago. Last month, $348,203. That's a lot of money to make in 1 year. But to do that in 1 month, phenomenal. Here's the question, though. Would Entrepreneur on Fire work without John Lee Dumas? John Lee Dumas releases a podcast every day. For almost 3 years, every day, brand new podcast. He's making enough money where he could outsource all of that. It's a system. He asks the same questions every single episode. No offense to John Lee Dumas, but more or less, every beginning podcast host could do what he's doing from a technical standpoint, but they're not bringing the personality. So to take it back to that question, would Entrepreneur on Fire work without John Lee Dumas? I don't think so. And because of that, could he sell it? Well, sure, somebody's going to pay something for it. He's making enough money where somebody would give him some money for it. But without John Lee Dumas, is Entrepreneur on Fire worth as much as it is with John Lee Dumas at the helm? I don't think so. Pat Flynn, another guy who was at Podcast Movement, last month, $143,424. Would smart passive income work without Pat? Absolutely not. Pat's personality is injected into every single piece of that site. There are no guest hosts on the Smart Passive Income podcast. Always Pat. He'll interview other people. He'll bring them in, but they're joining him. Would Smart Passive Income work without Pat Flynn? Absolutely not. Could he sell it? Yeah. When you're making $143,000 a month, yeah, somebody's going to buy what you've got at a price, but nobody is going to pay as much to buy that company without Pat Flynn as they would to have Pat Flynn run it. You, as an influencer, a blogger, a podcaster, a speaker, marketer, nonfiction author, the reason what you're doing is working is because of your personality. Lots of people blog. Lots of people podcast. Lots of people speak. Lots of marketers are out there, lots of nonfiction authors, lots of entrepreneurs. But nobody has your personality. Again, double-edged sword, because this is going to get you in the game. This is your secret weapon. This is why people are calling you, paying you the money. This is why people want you. But it is a double-edged sword. In just a minute, I'm going to talk about how to get around that as best we can. But know that the more you dive into this, the more you dive into what works for you, your personality, bringing yourself into the business. The word a lot of people use is authenticity, bringing your own personality into things. If you've been around for a while, you've probably seen personal development brands, guys like Jim Rohn, Zig Ziglar, all personality-based. What happens to those guys and their material when they go away? It's sold for pennies on the dollar. Kind of a dirty secret of personal development. The way those guys make money is by being on the road. And when they're not on the road, books stop selling, home study courses stop selling, and the value of all the content that they've produced. And a lot of these guys, very prolific. Zig Ziglar, very prolific. Jim Rohn, very prolific. It's purchased for pennies on the dollar. And if you look at what Success Magazine is doing right now, go to success.com. Look what they're doing with Jim Rohn's stuff. Trying to repurpose it. Darren Hardy, the publisher of Success, will interview Jim Rohn, basically putting his questions into some Jim Rohn answers, making it look like Jim Rohn has come back from the grave. Yeah, you can do that, but it doesn't have the impact as when Jim Rohn was around, because that personality is gone. We've got it on tape, but it doesn't exist in the present form. If you want to see a guy who's thinking about retiring, he's been in the game for a long time, and he's trying to move away from a personality-based business, you want to see how he's doing it? Look at Dave Ramsey, financial guru, talk radio host. He's been doing this at least 30 years. He's here where I am, Nashville, Tennessee, just a local radio guy. Would buy air on a local radio station, and he's grown this to be a nationwide business. People want Dave. They don't want somebody else. They don't want a guest host. They want Dave. What he's trying to do is bring in other people, what he calls Ramsey personalities. And he's done it. He tried to do it with John Acuff. We've had him on this show before. But John Acuff left. Tried to do it with Chris Licurdo, another local guy. Chris Licurdo left. It's not easy to bring in other people. It's especially not easy to bring in great people. Great people are going to do their own thing. They don't want to be second in command. They want to be the boss. So they're going to go do their own thing, which is what we've seen from Chris Licurdo, John Acuff, the guys that Ramsey has hired. That's something to think about. Your personality is going to get you in the door. It can make you a lot of money, but it's tough to exit from it. And when you go voluntarily or involuntarily, usually the business goes with you. Here's the upside, though. If you do decide to leave, you take your personality and your reputation with you. You might not be able to sell a business, but what you've got cannot be taken away from you. This is why we see somebody leave a partnership or start a new product, start a new website, a podcast, a radio show, and almost be instantly where they were with the previous effort, because you can take your personality with you. So if you're going to do this, I suggest going balls out. Go all in. Go ahead and own it. Own the fact that you're never going to be able to sell your company without you for as much as you could with you, because you are the company. But once you own that, you can go wherever you want to. There are a few possibilities for compromise. I want to talk about that before I go. Characters. Characters are not quite a company corporate image and not quite a personal image. An example of this, Betty Crocker, she never existed. People think she's a real person. Nope, just a brand. Just some guys in suits trying to bring personality to a baking mix to do just what I'm talking about right now. This works. This is why Betty Crocker is Betty Crocker. Bart Simpson, character, not a real person. Got a personality. There's a voiceover actor behind him that brings him to life. But you don't think that could be replaced? That's somebody in the shadows. Thousands of people could voice Bart Simpson effectively. Could they do it as well, and would it be as familiar to us as Nancy Cartwright, the person who voices him now? No. Would some people notice the difference if Nancy Cartwright were replaced? Absolutely. Some people, the hardcore fans, but if you were to be replaced, everybody would know. Huge difference. Same thing for somebody like Ronald McDonald, another character. There have been 7 of them. We don't know when Ronald gets replaced. Put somebody in makeup, give him a clown wig, clown nose, done. Kiss is one of my favorite examples, and they've changed this over the years. In the 70s, Kiss was 4 guys: Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, Peter Criss, Ace Frehley. Today, Kiss is just 2 of those guys and 2 other guys who put on the makeup. Pretty soon, it's going to be none of the original members. My theory is that pretty soon, we'll have half a dozen Kisses going around. It'll be like Blue Man Group. Just put on a bunch of blue paint. We don't know who those guys are. All we know is they're blue, and they bang on stuff. Same thing for Kiss. We'll have half a dozen different Kisses. We won't know which one we've got because it's a character. The character brings the personality. So that's your possibility for compromise. Think about that. You could make some money, but you're not going to make as much money as when you bring yourself into it. This is why these anonymous blogs that we used to see maybe 10, 15 years ago, let's say the niche is how to make money online. General money-making blogs, they don't work as well as Pat Flynn. That's why Pat is so successful. The guy put himself out there in video, in his writing, in audio, in his podcast, knowing who the guy is behind all of it. That's what brought him the money. And if you're willing to do the same thing, that's what's going to get you similar results. So I want you to think about this. If you could be making that kind of money, the John Lee Dumas, Pat Flynn type of money, $350,000 a month, $150,000 a month, you don't have to do it forever. You can have a very short career. If you want to end it, you can walk away from it and never make a cent again. But you're going to make more money in that short amount of time, bringing your personality into it than you would playing it safe, staying back in the shadows, and consistently doing lesser money for a longer period of time. So if you're asking yourself, should I be my brand? If I am, I'm never going to be able to sell this company. Think about the money that you're making. Make all your money in a short period of time, then walk away. If you want to be anonymous, use that money to build something else. You don't need to take it with you. Or if you do want to do another personality-based business, use that goodwill that you've built up and build something big that way. That is the best solution that I've got. Believe me, I've thought about this. That's my best advice on this. And on that note, something else to end with. Normally, I think it's great to diversify. I think it's great to diversify income streams, have different products, different services, different distribution methods. So if something gets hit, not everything else is going to go with it. But when it comes to injecting your personality in your business, should you be your brand, there's really no way around this. Maybe the character thing, if you feel comfortable doing that, maybe you can be like Dave Ramsey, hire some other personalities. But if you do that, I would think of it like this. Use those personalities to help build you up, help build up your brand. more or less, even with other personalities involved, it's still up to you and your personality to keep your company going. Next episode, I'll be continuing the branding discussion. Specifically, I'll be talking about podcasting. Should you do it? If you do want to get involved, there's a great opportunity in podcasting. That's the question that I'll be answering. And speaking of questions, if you've got questions, if you've got comments, reach out to me. I'm on Twitter, @DavidHooper is my username. If you're interested in connecting with other influencers, other bloggers, podcasters, speakers, marketers, authors, entrepreneurs, people that are making a difference, spreading their message, and making money, let me get you connected. It's a group that I call the Red Insiders. It's free. You can join at redpodcast.com. Go to the website. There's a sign-up form in the right-hand column. Thanks so much for listening to Red. I appreciate you, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Red Podcast.
You've been listening to Red Podcast, Real Entrepreneur Development. Subscribe today using iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.